When we talk about curriculum and we talk about relevance, it's important that our students have the background of knowledge and can connect to the curriculum. They can see themselves in that curriculum. The hope is that when we're including this piece, that our young people can connect and say, hey, isn't that my relative? Or hey, isn't that my friend's relative?
So being able to see people who are like us in the stories that we're telling, to see people who are our neighbors, people who we might bump into down the street, is important for people to make connections so that they can understand how those lessons relate to them.
When we fail to include underrepresented voices, our students do not have an opportunity to see from the advantage point of others' perspective. When you give kids an opportunity to learn about all people and how they all contributed, it really gives them a chance to look inwardly in themselves and then build that empathy.
It's not just designed for a high school or a traditional public school, private school, a Catholic school, private academy, a charter school. You'll be able to use this curriculum. If you work in the community center, an after-school program, or the library systems, this curriculum is versatile. The ideal is to really use this curriculum to get our students to connect to history, but to also understand the significant relevance of the African-American experience here in your county.
Hello all, welcome. My name is Matthew Jackson. I'm a co-founder along with the irrepressible Bill Swartz of the Valley, which has 8 administrators, 5 moderators, over 1,300 members. The Valley for Good Change in the Susquehanna Valley in the 717 exists to uplift people, places, and programs, and to be a coalescing agent and a convener for good ideas, good public thoughts, and good programs like the Keystones Oral History supplemental curriculum, which we feature today. In fact, 2 of our administrators are Dr. Sherry Washington, who designed this brilliant curriculum, and I had the opportunity to read over it this morning, and also Brian Wade is another administrator of the Valley, long time public intellectual and a fantastic human being. And they put together a grand slam project in the Keystones Oral History curriculum, which tells the stories of notable servicemen and women of color through all phases of US history. And they are York County citizens who we are now learning more about as we exfoliate our own biases and lapse of knowledge and gaps of knowledge. So without further ado, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us for the first Valley Peacemakers webinar. I'd like to briefly introduce our distinguished guests. First of all, Brian Wade, who's the CEO of Keystones, which started out 4 years ago, basically telling oral histories of servicemen and servicewomen of color in the South Central Pennsylvania region. And it has grown since then into this magnificent curriculum supplement. Dr. Sherry Washington, of course, who's the curriculum designer and incredibly intelligent and strong-willed, and I can't wait to hear more from her today. And we also have Dr. Ann Clark from Lincoln Charter School, and she is joined by, is it Ms. Smith? Is that right?
Mrs. Shante Smith.
Mrs. Shante Smith, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. And also Mr. Eric Wilson, who I had the pleasure of meeting yesterday, and he's from Red Lion School District. So true to our intentions and our mission and our vision with the Valley is to build what Martin Luther King called the beloved community, and to help nudge our area and our communities forward towards that ideal of brotherhood and sisterhood in harmony. So pursuant to that goal, we're going to have a conversation here today about the value and the merits of this oral history curriculum supplement. And we also wanted to point out there are 17 public schools in York County, more than 20 schools total when we count private schools. Lincoln Charter School, as we will soon learn, already has implemented the Keystones curriculum, as has Crispus Attucks Youth Build Charter School. So kudos and congratulations and bravo to these two noble institutions for doing that. We're here to spread the word, to be ambassadors, disciples of good news, and to try to share good information, solid information about this curriculum to other educators. And I also want to note, if anybody's interested in the Keystones Oral History curriculum, all you have to do is fill out a non-disclosure agreement through Mr. Brian Wade, and he will send you the curriculum so you can analyze it, absorb it, and see its merits for yourself. If I can do it, you can do it, and we encourage you to do it. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce my friend, and who I call a polymath, because I think he's a genius in many levels, Mr. Brian Wade, CEO of Keystones.
Thank
Brian?
you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you again, Mr. Jackson and the Valley, for hosting this first webinar regarding Keystones Oral Histories. You've given an overview about it. I wanted to say, although we're focusing on the curriculum today, the curriculum was really something that was a collaborative process that would align with the documentary. So when you see the documentary, if you haven't seen it, or if you have, the curriculum in a lot of ways dovetails very neatly with the curriculum. So we're not highlighting the curriculum, I mean the documentary, we're highlighting the curriculum. So what I'm going to do, seeing you've already introduced me and given some background, I want to go right into the panel discussion. But what I'd like to do is acknowledge a lot of the corporate sponsors that have made this endeavor possible. I'd like to acknowledge the Veterans Affairs Department of York County, Director Terry Gendron, AARP of Pennsylvania, Shipley Energy, Mr. William Shipley, the Powder Mill Foundation, Mr. Mike Haiti, York College of Pennsylvania Centers for Community Engagement, Dr. Dominic Della Carpini, York Community Foundation, led by Ms. Jane Conover, Bishop and Mrs. Nathan Baxter, thank them for their support, and M&T Bank. And as they always say, I hope I didn't forget anybody, but this couldn't be made possible without their generous support. And I'm very grateful. I've been able to pull together a great team of individuals, one of which I met in the beginning of 2020, and that's Dr. Sherry Washington. And when I told her about what Keystones had done in Dauphin County, I wanted to bring it to York County, Pennsylvania, where I've done really most of my professional career. I'm a native of Harrisburg, but I've done most of my professional career in York County, Pennsylvania. She was elated and she really liked the concept. And as I always tell in terms of my journey, I didn't have a penny to rub against another penny at the time. But God opened doors, and we're here now because of God's grace and mercy. So we want to be very informative. So at this time, I'd like Dr. Sherry Washington to prepare for her presentation. She's done a wonderful job. And later on, I'll read a letter that was just sent to me by Dr. Scott Deisley, who's the superintendent of Red Lion Schools. So at this time, I'd like to turn over this session to Dr. Sherry Washington, designer of the Keystones Oral Histories curriculum. Dr. Washington.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brian, for that great introduction. So what I'd like to do today is go through a little bit of the curriculum for you and just give you an overview. So as Brian said, he came to me and said, I've always loved Brian's documentaries. They're always done professionally, and the opportunity to add to this to benefit school districts and young people is amazing. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
All righty. And so this is our cover. The Keystone curriculum, oops, let me scroll down, is aligned to our standards, our PA Core Common Standards, our National Common Core, what we call the National Curriculum Standards for Social Studies. That's one of the newer frameworks, but it does exist. It has existed since 2010. And then we also have our College, Career, and Civic Life Standards. We call it the C3 framework that is aligned with our state standards for Pennsylvania, our PA Common Core. What I'd like to highlight for you is, so I'm going through this, so I have a short amount of time and I want to make sure I cover everything. Although this curriculum is what you see as a model, works best with grades 5 through 12, there's a vertical articulation and a progression. And so the way the curriculum map is designed, you can backward map it to grades K to 4. Okay. The first part I'd like to go over in our curriculum map is what old school teachers we call scope and sequence. And so in the scope and sequence, you will see how each module is aligned to the documentary. The only difference is module 1, which talks about the African-American cemeteries. And that is necessary for us to introduce this curriculum because you need that framework to talk about how the African-American cemeteries are connected to the topics and the young people, the ideals that we're presenting, that have been presented in the documentary. The second piece I'd like to share with you is our curriculum map. And so if you are an educator here today, you're aware that each school district, whether you're a charter school or a private school, but especially a public school district, you have to have a curriculum map. And as stated earlier, this curriculum map is aligned to the Common Core standards, PA Core standards, and the national standards. So I'm going to just point here. So as our map, and it's aligned to what you see on the Pennsylvania PDE SAS framework, standards aligned framework. And so we have our C3, it's career, work, and education. Most school districts go with what's called an LEQ, and that's your lesson essential question. That is the key question to help students realize this is what we're studying today, and this is what we're expected to comprehend and understand. Connected to the LEQ are your learning objectives. We want to analyze, identify, and create. And usually those are the verbs we use in education because that's how we're going to measure whether or not the students have obtained the standards, if they met the task at hand. So that's our traditional curriculum map. Up top, what you can see is our UEQ. So in every school district, you should have a unit essential question that's connected to your lesson essential question. And then some districts, but in this map, we included the big ideal. So this is a module 1. Each module is connected to the scope and sequence, as I stated in the documentary. Under here, what a lot of teachers have liked is, as an educator, I always wanted to have options. I didn't feel comfortable. I appreciated the curriculum map, but I never wanted to demand that teachers follow a canned program. So we gave you optional resources that you can use based on the skill set of your class. All right. The next slide I want to show is we did a scope and sequence. The IDM. Our IDM was what we call inquiry design model. It kind of goes with Common Core. We want our students to engage in asking questions and not just sitting there and regurgitating information or filling out a packet or a worksheet. And so what you see here is it complements the curriculum. Why am I not able to share? Each module is represented again. And this is something that is good for an administrator or for that teacher that says, hey, I know the curriculum map is there, but I want to just get a quick glimpse. So each module talks about the topic, the compelling question, and then supporting questions. And so these supporting questions can be connected to 3 lessons as they relate to the topic, the unit, it's a central question. Each educator should have a formative assessment that, that's when you're measuring a quick measure on whether or not the students are understanding what you're teaching. And again, we have additional resources. Some districts require you to have a summative assessment at the end of the module. A module is like a unit. And everything's there for the teacher. It's aligned, it's clear, but it still gives the teacher the option to be a little flexible with the lesson. And the last thing I want to talk about is our lesson plan. In Pennsylvania, our teachers are required, most districts, to adhere to what we call the Danielson framework. This is a framework that is utilized in school districts to make sure we're meeting the standards as a school district, but it's also, this lesson plan is aligned to the evaluation tool that are how our teachers are evaluated. Again, we're pulling the big ideal directly from the curriculum map, the topic directly from the IDM, the inquiry-based model, and then we have our supporting questions. The compelling question, everything in this template is coming directly from the curriculum map or the IDM. I love being a teacher in the classroom. And one of the things, we always have to do in the classroom is make sure we have a statement of our objectives where we know what our students are focusing on. We have the language objective. And then your PA core common standards are written there, and your C3 framework. Okay. And again, I'll just summarize. Our lessons this curriculum map is aligned to the Common Core standards, the Pennsylvania Core standards, the history standards, and this is the second page of the lesson plan. As you can see, the traditional parts of a lesson plan, your anticipatory setting, the warm up, the do now, your intro is always your short lecture, and then you have your guided practice with the activities, and then independent practice. And in education, we have this framework that says, I do, we do, and you do. And that's kind of like the framework teachers use when you're teaching a lesson. And so the I do is the introductory part, the we do is the guided practice, and the you do by yourself is the independent practice. Most districts, this curriculum follows what we call understanding by design, UBD, which is a term coined by Grant and Wiggins. And it's a philosophical process of how curriculum should be designed throughout the United States. The last part that I love about the lesson plan, again, I tried to design it so that it would be teacher friendly, helping the teachers align and not having to go to different places. You can check off what type of formative assessment did you do. You don't have to limit it to this, but this is an option, and teachers can write their own suggestions in there because some school districts have specific tasks that teachers have to do, or you can do a summative assessment. Again, the resources. And then the one thing I used to like when I used to teach in the classroom is reflection. As a teacher, this gives you an opportunity to reflect on how did you teach the lesson? How did you engage the student? What do you think the response was? How did the lesson presentation go? So that's basically our summary of the curriculum map. Brian, did I stay on time?
You did a great job. Thank you so much, Dr. Washington. Appreciate it. And if we have time at the end, we'll come back to you for any other final thoughts you may have about the curriculum, okay? Thank you, Dr. Washington. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Wilson, who is the Chief Instructional Officer for the Red Lion School District. He's been gracious enough to be a part of this session. But what I'd like to do before we get to Mr. Wilson is read a letter that I got from Dr. Scott Deisley, who's the superintendent for the Red Lion Schools. And he said, "Dear educators, the Keystones Oral History projects focus on York County African-American veterans is a launching pad for educators and students to celebrate the accomplishments of their neighbors, both past and present. The use of the oral history approach to teach the skills and concepts ingrained in the PA core standards, the NC or National Core or National Common Core standards, and C3 national curricula is powerful. Through this project, Brian Wade and his team have given voice to groups of individuals that have not told their stories to the larger community. Fortunately, I have had the opportunity to engage with Brian and his team of curricular writers and videographers for the past couple of years. The scholarship that has been put into this curriculum is superior. Watching the project develop and hearing the feedback from diverse community groups across York County has been exciting and experienced. Oral histories are as old as humans. Histories and informations have been passed from generation to generation through oral tradition. Brian's vision has brought the tradition into the 21st century and propelled those stories into perpetuity. As educators, the Keystones Oral History Project is a vehicle that we can bring to use these stories of accomplished peoples to our students in an engaging and timeless way. The curriculum provides students and educators with effectively crafted lessons that discuss people and places that are in our students' backyards. Whether it's a tour of Potter's Field or walking alongside the 92nd and 93rd Divisions of World War I, also commonly known as the Harlem Hellfighters, students will hear firsthand accounts of the people's lives through this historical events. I look forward to the release of the curriculum so that the educators across York County can begin to explore the project and give those voices to these York Countians who have helped to shape our present day. I am confident that the Keystones Oral History Project will easily supplement and complement the curricular course offerings in our schools. I am confident that once educators have had a chance to engage with this curriculum, they will share my beliefs. Sincerely, Dr. Scott Deisley, Superintendent of Schools, the Red Lion School District. Thank you, Dr. Deisley. This time I'd like to just have a little dialogue with Mr. Eric Wilson, who's the Chief Instructional Officer. Mr. Wilson, you've heard Dr. Washington's overview of the curriculum. Give us your impressions and how you and your team, what your impressions of the curriculum was. Mr. Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. So just recently, we've had the opportunity to share the curriculum pieces with our junior high and senior high department chairs. So we're very early in the review process, but their feedback's been very positive. Really taking a look at the fact that our students don't necessarily get the chance to, I'll say, visit places that you typically see in textbooks. A York County history is vital because they can see the sites that they normally drive by, visit, go to. It really makes it much more meaningful to them. Identifying the different locations. We saw there, Wrightsville Bridge was one of the pieces that were located. That's very close to our school district, so our students would know that. Just that contextualizing, that making it tangible to our students is huge for student engagement. And we really see a lot of positives with that component. And with the oral component of everything, that firsthand knowledge, you can hear the perspectives, you can hear the direct accounts of individuals, and our students will get a chance to realize that York County is a huge place for history. Really, once again, connecting them to the county, connecting what we do here. So many times you see this in a smaller context, but they're able to take it to scale now. They're able to hear what happened, see the events, and go from York County to how we impact the United States, to how our impact was really global. So that level of pride is something that you don't get just from a typical textbook or typical resources you may go out and look for on the internet. So those were two huge components that were immediately brought to light from our review with the lead department chairs. And I'd also like to share, some of the other pieces, just taking a look at the physical curriculum itself, the way it was constructed is beautiful from a curriculum director standpoint. You really see all of the components that are a necessity, as Dr. Rowland said, that it's what all school districts ask for. Making sure the UEQ is there, the LEQ, it really is something that can be utilized the next day. It's the lesson planning is there, it's solid. What I really appreciated was her digging into and looking at what we always delineate as the science of teaching versus the art of teaching. There's the science of teaching. Here are the best practices that you can hop in and you can do. But as for the art of teaching, you as the teacher, you as the professional, you can pick the assessments, you can pick the extensions, you can pick how you want to direct depending upon the class you have in front of you, depending upon the time you're choosing to spend or delineated to spend on a certain topic. So those components of the physical curriculum itself are just very, very much appreciated. As far as the reviewers go, as far as I'll speak for other school districts, you don't get that level of complexity, that level of in-depth review that you do with other pieces that you may just go and find off a shelf or purchase, or again, go to the internet and really look for. So again, we are very early in the review process, but what we've seen has been well received by our junior and senior high department leads, and we look forward to having those conversations with the rest of the department members moving forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson. We may come back to you when we go into our question and answer segment.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Annie Clark from the Lincoln Charter School. And I'd like for her, I've been working with the charter school off and on for several months, and they've had a chance to review it. And I also met with Ms. Smith, but I'd like to get Dr. Clark's perspective. Dr. Clark, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wade. Well, Lincoln Charter School has been honored to participate in the curriculum. The students of Lincoln Charter School have connected with the iconic leaders as part of this oral history, including Mayor Seacom Bracey, Carmen Bryant, Bonnie Grimes, and Ray Crenshaw. These are just a few leaders that are put into this curriculum. I grew up with these leaders and have worked with many of them personally. I served on my first board with Bonnie Grimes. And so to get to see this history and know that it will be here for children for the future is amazing to me. As growing up as a Yorker, we're very proud of everyone that comes from our community. And now for residents outside of the city to know some of these iconic figures and to realize what they've contributed to our community is really going to be amazing. You really can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. One of the things that our board loved about this was that our board has encouraged Lincoln Charter School team to diversify the curriculum that we're using. I know that this is a push across the country, that curriculum really needs to model the students that attend the school, and so that they can see themselves in those iconic leaders and say, well, if that person can do it, I could do it too. And I'm not going to steal Miss Thunder, but she has a couple examples of just that that she's already discovered in the classroom. One thing that I love about oral history in general is just the power of words. We know that this is historically how records have been kept, is passing these stories down from one person to another, one generation to the next. So it's just so important for us to continue with that oral history and have our students understand that they can tell us things first and then they can write them down later, and that it matters that way. And so just understanding culturally what that means to a community is important. I love the curriculum. It's a perfect fit, not only for history, but our charter is also written on human services. And so just having these iconic figures who served, of course, in the military, but did so much more in our community, that was like their starting point. It really aids in that human service conversation with our students about how the military can be that starting point, or even William Penn was that starting point for a lot of the icons, and then how they use that later on to become more things. I also love how the curriculum is designed. I appreciate that it's aligned to Danielson's model, because that's the framework we use to evaluate our teachers. In addition, I love that it was teacher friendly, which makes a huge difference for our teachers. When you're asking them to start new curriculum, it's very hard for them. It's very stressful for them. But this is just really easy. You can pick up that card and deliver the instruction, which is great. And I also just loved that the essential questioning is there, and this aids in Lincoln Charter School. We do a lot of project-based learning. So I can see our students ending that lesson and being able to move right into project-based learning and have that learning displayed in our organization. So that's my thoughts of the curriculum to this point.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to introduce, I believe, one of the instructors that has been implementing the curriculum, Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, provide your perspective as how that's been going, in terms of your utilization. Ms. Smith.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mr. Wade, and thank you for allowing me to speak on the panel.
Sure.
I would like to say, first of all, that I'm so elated to have this type of curriculum within this community. I'm not originally from York, Pennsylvania. So for me, it's something different because to be in Pennsylvania and not know the full culture kind of puts me at a line where I want to teach the children, but don't know how to teach them about their own community. There is a gap in our children not understanding their culture, where they come from, why there's places that are memorialized for certain legendary people. Some of the things that I've had to learn, that dialogue is very important. So that oral piece, the oral history, is important because it's a modified way to teach students on all levels. Everything is not always written. You're getting it firsthand from the person that's doing the documentary. So they're picking it up as they're listening to it. And that blends with the modified students who are maybe on a lower level as well as a higher level. We're able to pause through the instructional pieces and just pick up the pieces and have honest dialogue about some of these things that we're discussing within the community. The other thing that I love is that while this is being introduced, vocabulary is so key. A lot of our students and our children, unfortunately, because we are dealing with a different generation, have not been exposed to dialogue, and they don't understand certain words like veteran. So vocabulary, being able to stop and break down vocabulary for them is also helpful. So they are making the connection when we're talking about certain people, why it was monumental. Example, today we were discussing William C. Goodrich. And William C. Goodrich, they see this memorialized man on the side of their wall that they pass every day, and they're just thinking he's a figure. They have no clue of what his background was and why he's even memorialized. But before I can even start the memorialization, I had to break down what that identified as. How do we use the words memorialize? What does it mean? A structure or a painting of somebody legendary, a person or an event. I had to break down the vocabulary. So the oral piece for me helps me to diverse some students who are able to move a little swifter, some students who are moving a little slower. Some kids make it, and we're talking about 5th and 6th graders. This is the first opportunity for me to introduce to the 5th grade. We're actually just starting this within the last couple of weeks because I definitely wanted to dig deep into the curriculum, which I love the fact that Dr. Washington was able to help navigate the lesson plan a little bit clearer. For me, just looking at the lesson plan, it's like, okay, I can go here, but I could spend months on one lesson plan because I try to dive into every little piece before I teach it. But the way she broke it down for me just showed me that I can kind of even cut corners to go from one place to another if I'm teaching a specific area of that curriculum. As we were talking about William C. Goodrich today, I had to help them identify. I gave them a little documentary history on William C. Goodrich and the reason why those particular pictures were behind him. The train, what that meant. The barber pole, what that meant. The emporium, what that meant. And then we were able to break down the word emporium so they understood. How do we take emporium from then and what is our emporium of today? So we was able to compare and contrast even in this little lesson. I love this curriculum, honestly, because being a woman of color, and I have diverse colors in my DNA. I'm not from York, Pennsylvania, but this also allows me to learn a little bit more about York so that they can see the beauty in their community. Another situation where we was looking at your documentary, the actual beginning opening portion of the documentary, one of my students actually saw their grandmother at the ending of the piece of the picture. And she stopped and she said, "That is my grandmother." And I said, "Are you sure that's your grandmother?" She said, "Mrs. Smith, I know that's my grandmother." And I said, "Did you know that your grandmother used to be in the military. And she said, no, she lives in Maryland now. I'm gonna have to call her. So this gives opportunity for this child to be able to interview her grandmother, not just about what she does as being a grandma, but what she did do prior to being a grandmother. So I love the open document. I love the opportunity for the children to be excited about living people and even people that was in their past, the opportunity to sit down and discuss with people in their neighborhood about their former lives. Unfortunately, York, Pennsylvania is almost a decade behind so many different things. I'm from Queens, New York. So when I come here and I hear certain things, I don't connect with the fact that there is such a behind state. But I do feel like York, Pennsylvania need to embrace the full opportunity to teach the community in which we live. We have more Latinos and we have more African-American students who need to know their culture. And I love this curriculum.
Ms. Smith, had you ever seen a combination of a documentary and a world-class curriculum put together like this?
I don't know where I could get it from, but I'm glad I'm in it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your participation. This time I'd like to turn it back over to Mr. Matt Jackson. I believe there may be some questions. If not, then we can continue the discussion. Mr. Jackson, please.
Well, one point, and Eric taught me about this yesterday, so I'd like him and the other panelists to expound. Lest we forget, a lot of our students in York County, I grew up in Southwestern York County and went to Southwestern High School. A lot of our students don't travel, or they're not, so if they don't travel and they don't have these touchstones or milestones of accomplishment that bring these stories, the idea, as Sherry Washington said, and break that idea down into something that's tangible, real, and right around the neighborhood for them, or they might be related to them, as Mrs. Shante Reed-Smith pointed out. I think that's very important in terms of role models, civic awareness, as Sherry talked about earlier. I'd like each of the panelists just to talk a little bit about how that helps self-esteem, civics, role modeling. What are your thoughts on that? Eric, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, honestly, one of the things that we focus on here is we hear, well, this is little old Red Line. And we do hear that a lot. And to change the perspective of, well, I just live in Red Line, I just live in York County, I just live in South Central Pennsylvania, that just needs to go. Because you go back how many decades, and you can see the importance of York County, you can see the importance of Central Pennsylvania in and of itself. And again, that self-esteem, the confidence that you had said, go back to the different industrial revolutions, and they'll be able to see that there's a history of work, there's a history of accomplishment, there's a history of being on that forefront. And again, I just go back to the fact of our kids need to see that, and they need to take pride in where they live. Many of our residents, I'm going to paint with a broad brush, many of our residents do stay in local. And that's something that's very important for them to know where they came from, to know where we stand in the national scheme of things, and to be proud of that and to share that with future generations. So I really see this as something that puts that on the forefront, puts it in the front of everyone's minds, and can drive that point home.
Very well said. Very well said. Sherry, do you want to expound or elaborate upon that in terms of the role modeling and having someone in our neck of the woods, a host of heroes and people of valor and substance to inspire us?
I'm sorry, Matt. I'm still taken back by Mrs. Smith's presentation.
Okay.
Everything she shared was the intention I poured into, so I'm a little teary-eyed.
Oh, that's great.
So if you can move to the next person.
That's fine. Well, Mrs. Shante Reed-Smith, I'm not crying yet, but what you said was so impressive, because the whole idea, at least our involvement from the Valley, is to help students' awareness. But your testimonial was about your awareness, your understanding. And lest we forget, teachers are human beings too. And York County has this tremendous story to tell. And for those who don't know, William Goodridge was an Underground Railroad conductor, entrepreneur, extraordinaire in downtown York, and escorted or curated a lot of freedom seekers to freedom north of the Mason-Dixon line. John Atticus, or Aquila, it's Aquila, right? John Aquila Wilson.
John Aquila Wilson, yes.
Just a remarkable hero that, and I'll admit my ignorance here, which is easy for me to do. I had no idea his amazing story in fighting the Northern surge of the Confederates in 1863 in Wrightsville. And that was never taught to me as a child, as a young adult, even into my 30s. So these stories, we're living in this golden age of new history in York County and the 717. And a lot of people are helping tell these stories. And it's just beautiful how seamless and aligned this curriculum is with our evolving social understanding, but also our evolving understanding of what it means to be committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and cultural literacy. Any thoughts on that, Mrs. Shante Reed-Smith?
I feel like, in honesty, being a person that's stepping into such a more diverse world, and as you can see, I'm sorry, I'm teary-eyed as well. In a more diverse world, I do feel like it's necessary for the forwardness of this state, as well as our young people. They are going to become our future. These are our future leaders of York, Pennsylvania. They cannot lead until they have understand how they followed. And that's the honest truth. You're going to put somebody in the mayor's seat in 15 or 20 years, but if they have no history of Kim Bracey, Mayor Kim Bracey, how can they fully fulfill the seat? They have to identify. It's almost like that railroad path, like almost the Underground Railroad. We have to take our students through this Underground Railroad so they can get out on the other side. It is necessary for not just this city, but all parts of York, Pennsylvania, or Pennsylvania to identify this little railroad track.
Well, I hope it's the overground railroad now and it won't have to be underground. How about that?
Well, you all are rock stars. We promised that we'd end around 4:45. If there's nothing else pressing, I just want to thank all of you. You're all rock stars. You're all heroes to me. And implementing this curriculum is going to take time. It's going to take not just this session, but maybe a dozen more. So if you're interested in learning more about Keystones, please reach out to Mr. Brian Wade through the Keystones website, keystonesoralhistories.com. Also, don't forget to join the Valley, because we have all kinds of updates on Keystones and all kinds of testimonials, as well as brief biographical snippets of some of these amazing historical personalities that went through so much, that persevered, and we can learn so much from them. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and blessings, peace, light, and love to you.
And I'd like to close out, please, with this quote. I know Robert Kennedy that he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, some see things and say why, and I see things and say why not. And this is part of the experience of this journey. So I also want to thank Amanda Beard. She's with Hanover United. She's been very supportive in this process. So again, for the Valley and Keystones Oral Histories, good night and God bless.